Hello everyone, and I'm Markos, and here is Chaim Ratz, who, if you don't know him, he is both a student of the B'nai Baruch Kabbalah Education and Research Institute for many years, I don't know, more than 20 years for sure, and also a long time, the first ever translator to the English language from Hebrew, Kabbalist Dr. Laitman's translator for many years. You could say official translator, and also the executive editor of all the books coming out under Kabbalist Dr. Laitman, and also our other sources of Kabbalist Yehudi Ashlag, Kabbalist Baruch Ashlag. I could keep going on and on about Chaim. How are you going, Chaim?
Yeah, all right.
The reason I brought Chaim on is we were originally going to do a talk about Kabbalistic books, giving a review of a whole history of Kabbalistic books coming out under Rav Laitman. And we planned that even before this new situation took place, before October 7th, with tragic events that took place then, and the follow-up with the Israel-Hamas war, and all the rising events of anti-Semitism, and you could even just say hatred in general going around the world. So we discussed it after then, and we said, let's do a special session where we focus in just on this specific topic, because the wisdom of Kabbalah, as well as Kabbalist Dr. Laitman, who teaches it, Kabbalist Yehudi Ashlag, or as we call him, Baal HaSulam, also felt a great urgency to put across a certain message in relation specifically to this topic, and that's what we're going to focus on in this session. And we called it the hardest and most unpopular message of Kabbalah, because it really is one of the hardest and most unpopular messages to absorb. There's been lectures that Dr. Laitman's given on this topic where people have walked out. There's been a whole bunch of it can raise a lot of emotions and resistance, because you're dealing with you're dealing specifically with this point within a person which hates, which has hatred towards specifically Jewish people. And the wisdom of Kabbalah explains these things in a very deep way, which you don't find anywhere else. It's as if the world, you can see it right now, it's as if the world right now, it kind of looks like a prison yard a bit, where if anyone's been to prison, you'd know that you go to prison and you're invited to be either on this gang or this gang, and if you join a certain gang, then you get all the strength from that gang, on condition that you're against the other one. And that's kind of how the world looks right now. And Kabbalists rather look at things as if behind the scenes, as if that's playing out as some kind of movie over there, and they see how that's being managed at the levels of the forces of nature, how nature works on everybody, on humanity, at the level of desires, on the level of thoughts, and they give a perspective of what's going on from behind the scenes. And sometimes it's very hard for us to do that process. Anyone who's been watching these lessons either on YouTube, or if you've joined KabU and you watch there, in short, if you've been following the wisdom of Kabbalah in one way or another, you'd understand that one of the big things with Kabbalah is defocusing our perception on all kinds of concepts, definitions that we grew up with, and firstly defocusing them on what we once knew and what we think we know of them. In this particular case, all kinds of concepts such as Israel, Jews, anti-Semitism, and many other things, concepts of God. Pretty much every single word and definition we have in relation to something spiritual or something that the Kabbalists once described. You could say that Kabbalists come to explain that from a completely different vantage point. And when we're learning this wisdom, there's a lot of work we need to do of, as we said, defocusing our perception on what we once knew and starting to refocus it on what the Kabbalists mean by these things. And that's a lot of what we do in general, and we're going to focus that specifically on this topic today. So just a little bit of context, if we can go to the presentation a bit, just to give a bit of intro. You might all know this diagram well if you've been following our stuff. We talk about the development of desires in humanity a lot in the wisdom of Kabbalah, how we develop through desires for all kinds of corporeal things, for food, sex, family, money, honor, control, knowledge, and then spirituality. When we get the desire for spirituality, we start asking about the meaning of life. We call that having a point in the heart. And that as well, in the wisdom of Kabbalah, that specific desire, the desire for spirituality, that's what's called Israel, or it's called Yeshar Kel, from the word straight to God. It's this desire in a person which questions the meaning of life, which wants to rise above all the corporeal desires. You probably would have heard of that up until today. That's what the wisdom of Kabbalah defines as Israel. In Baal HaSulam's article, Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, he even says that if you think that Israel is a nationalistic concept, you'd be an insane person. They actually talk about it in relation to a desire that's playing out in a person. If we can just keep going with the presentation. So when we get that desire for spirituality, the wisdom of Kabbalah is a method of nurturing this desire, growing it from our point in this world through what's called the upper worlds, which Kabbalah calls Asiya, Yetzirah, Bria, Atzilut, to the world of Ein Sof, where we reach equivalence of form with what the Kabbalists call the Creator, which is defined as a force of love and bestowal, of ultimate connection that we reach. We don't really need to worry about these words right now, Asiya, Yetzirah. It's just other worlds means other layers of perception of reality that we unravel by specifically nurturing this point in the heart to develop through all these filters that we know of. And just like we said that the word Israel relates to the point in the heart, this desire for spirituality, also the word Jew, this is actually a quote from Yarot Dvash, it's an old text from Kabbalists. It says that the Hebrew word for Jew, Yehudi, comes from the word for united. So just as the first people to actualize Abraham's method were those who were called the people of Israel, those with this common desire for spirituality who developed it and developed that desire for spirituality above the corporeal desires. So that unity that created, those same people were later got the name Jews in Moses' time. That was the time that we heard the word Jews come about, meaning that simply it's this motion to unite above our egoistic, above our egoistic, self-serving, divisive desires. If we could somewhat attempt to diagrammatize that, so you have here, you could say, egoistic desires. Let's say each one of these black points is a sack of egoistic desires in each different person, in some kind of group that's coming together to rise above them. What brings them together to actually want to unite in the first place is having this special desire for spirituality that awakens with them, this desire which starts questioning things beyond the corporeal level of desires. And with the method of Kabbalah, we gain the ability to work, to apply efforts to try to unite all these points into a common place which unites them. And the place which unites them, it's probably incorrect to say place, more like a force which unites them, is that force of what's called the Creator. Kabbalists give it many names, the upper force, the upper light. It's what we draw through this method to unite these points. And yeah, so you could say that's stage one of all these people who were given this desire, these people who are called people of Israel. They develop that into these desires for spirituality, points in the heart. It's called reaching a state of love your neighbor as yourself. And then stage two is that from this critical mass of people who have these desires, it could be any person, regardless of their biological background, when that unity takes place, it spreads to human consciousness in general. It's called that spreading of unity to humanity worldwide. And in the Torah, it's given the name a light unto the nations, that these people who are able to make that unity happen and draw the light, they spread it outward to all of humanity. Just another side note here, that same linear diagram of desires that we looked at before, you could also portray it in this pyramid fashion. In a pyramid fashion, you also see this comparison between quantity and quality. You see here that the desires for food, sex, family are desires that every single person on earth has. It's called every single individual has them, regardless of connection to society. If you compare the desire for money, which you can say that a lot of people have a desire for money, but there's still tribes out there who aren't so concerned with money. You know, that it's not like every single person on earth has this desire. It's already, the higher you come up to you overcome one threshold of desire, you reach another level of desire, and already the quantity decreases. So likewise, if you think about people who, everyone out there making money, let's just even take a basic company. You might have 1,000 people working there, and within those 1,000 you only have like a handful who are managers and one who is a CEO. you see that, again, the higher level up, the level of desire for honor, control, power, the less quantity. And that brings us to the point in the heart, which is also a question we often get asked as Kabbalah instructors over here. We often get asked, why do so few people come to this method when it teaches such sublime things? It's precisely because the least amount of people in humanity who have this desire for spirituality is, again, this principle of the higher quality is of lesser quantity. So just as there are less people who have desires for honor, control, and knowledge to the previous levels of desire, so there's also a lesser amount who actively ask about the meaning of their lives and go outside of all kinds of traditional frameworks, outside of corporeal pursuits to pursue a spiritual pursuit, and those are the ones who come to that thing. Now this brings us to our more complicated topic, which we are dealing with today. I'm doing all this as an introduction, and soon we'll pass it over to Chaim to say a few words. But let's just keep going back to the diagram a bit more, Yehudi. So here we get a little bit more complicated, because all we've been talking about are these spiritual definitions of Israel and of Jews, which means having this point in the heart, working to connect these points in the heart, which develops a unity among them. There's this concept of Jews, which is a corporeal, you could say corporeal Jews, meaning that there are people in the world who are called Jewish by, what could you say, by their birth certificate, or whether they converted to it, that they have Jewish mothers, etc., etc. So what is this quality here? So these people are ones who have ancestry, because everyone who's called a Jew has ancestors who were at one point in that spiritual state, following Abraham's method to do those actions that we just talked about. They once were in a spiritual level of, developing and nurturing their points in the heart and uniting them, drawing that light from above and acting as that light unto the nations in practice. And since then, there's been what's called a period of exile, where we fell from that spiritual height and entered corporeality. And then all these spiritual concepts that we read about in the Torah, which Kabbalah defines in purely a spiritual context, meaning at the level of desires and thoughts and inner work that we do. We give many programs describing those. I'm sure you can find those even on our YouTube channel and in Kabu. But all that work that we do at the level of inner work in the wisdom of Kabbalah. So all that stuff that was written in the Torah got interpreted in a corporeal way as all kinds of corporeal actions. And for many, you could say centuries, generations, there's this aspect of people who continued that in a religious framework, and that brings us to the Jews we know of today. And then there's called the nations of the world, which nations of the world in the inner Kabbalistic definition means the other desires we have, meaning all those corporeal desires. And we'll leave it at that for now. Yeah, so that's a bit of an intro to this whole topic. And what happens with this whole, you can come back to me now, and Chaim, Yehudi. So what we're going to talk about now is this whole idea of the role of the Jewish people, that since there are these people who have that ancestry, who are ancestors of people who had these points in the heart, who developed and nurtured those points in the heart, and reached a state of unity of those points in the heart, had that access to the Creator's light and were able to pass that light on. And since then, there's been a period of exile of this going, you could say, under this point in the heart, kind of getting buried in the egoistic desires, and these people being recognized externally as Jews, but not really realizing the inner meaning of what it means to be a Jew in the spiritual sense, which is actually what we learn in the wisdom of Kabbalah. So we come to this whole situation of anti-Semitism. Maybe you want to take it from here a bit.
Maybe it would be good to start with a quote from Baal HaSulam about the Jewish people being a conduit or a pipeline for all of humanity, so we understand the role of the Jews.
All right, let's put on the presentation. This is, we have a few of these quotes here. This is one by Baal HaSulam, who wrote extensively on the topic, so we'll just read this. This is to speak of the Arvut, a mutual guarantee, when all of Israel, became responsible for one another. So all of Israel, all those with these points in the heart, they developed this mutual responsibility to raise the points in the heart, raise that desire for spirituality above the corporeal desires. Because the Torah was not given to them, before each and every one from Israel was asked if he agreed to take upon himself the mitzvah, the precept, of loving others in the full measure expressed in the words, "Love thy friend as thyself." This means that each and every one in Israel would take it upon himself to care and work for each member of the nation and to satisfy all their every need, no less than the measure imprinted in him to care for his own needs. And once the whole nation unanimously agreed and said, "We shall do and we shall hear," each member of Israel became responsible that nothing shall be missing from any other member of the nation. Only then did they become worthy of receiving the Torah and not before.
Yeah, but this one talks about how the people of Israel was formed.
Okay.
Let's find the one that explains what happens once the Israeli nation becomes a nation where people care for one another as themselves.
All right, let's give us...
Here.
There we go. Okay, This is a good one. The Israeli nation, or you could say the people of Israel, again, those with these points in the hearts, just to keep clarifying that, and who united these points in the heart. So that they've been constructed as a sort of gateway by which the sparks of purity would shine upon the whole of the human race, the world over. And these sparks multiply daily, like one who gives to the treasurer until they are filled sufficiently, that is, until they develop to such an extent that they can understand the pleasantness and tranquility that are found in the kernel of love of others. There you go.
Right. So, to understand how we come into such a state where the Israeli nation receives such a mission, such an assignment. What's the camera I'm looking at? This one?
Yeah, just look there.
All right. We need to understand where the people of Israel come from and how it was formed. Because usually nations are formed either by biological familial affinity, or people live in close vicinity to one another and they grow and develop from there and become a nation, like a tribe, and so on. The Israeli nation is very different. It started when Abraham discovered that the reason that his own people, the Babylonians, were falling apart socially was that they were growing increasingly self-centered. So he began to talk about the need to unite, the need to rise above selfishness, and to form unity where people don't concentrate on themselves, but on each other's needs, and this way form a solid society. And those who agreed with him became his students. But most people didn't, because the egoistic nature does not like the idea of loving others, certainly not loving others as yourself. So he got into a conflict with the ruler of Babylon at the time, and he was expelled. He went out together with his students and kept on talking about his ideas as he was going westward toward the land of Canaan, which later became the land of Israel. And more people joined him. And these people became the kernel of the people of Israel. So they were not biologically affiliated. They were not culturally similar. They often came from rival tribes and nations. They were not associated with in any ties, economic or social or anything else. They had nothing in common except the idea that unity is better than selfishness. So in order to form a nation made of such an abstract idea, they had to make it so important in their eyes that nothing else mattered. They went through several stages. They went into the land of Canaan. Abraham died, and then Isaac and Jacob, they went to Egypt. They had Joseph. They thrived in Egypt, and then Joseph died, and they began to disperse again. And then Moses came and reunited them. And once he got them out of Egypt, they agreed to love each other as one man with one heart. And that's when they were declared a nation. And at that point, anti-Semitism was born. Because at that point, it became so extreme that either you agreed to love everyone as yourself. In other words, instead of yourself, because right now you love yourself 100%. So if you love others 100%, then you have nothing left for your own love. But everyone is like that. So there's mutual responsibility here that Markos read before. So either you agreed to this absolute condition, or you totally detested it. And you could not stand the people who stood for it, and fought for it, and lived for it. And you started hating the Hebrews, which later became Jews. So that's the root of anti-Semitism. And ever since then, physical Jews have represented subconsciously this idea of absolute unity. And anyone who opposes Jews subconsciously has a kind of a feeling, like a gut feeling that there's something different about them. And that person feels that something is the relinquishment of the ego. And so because we all are incapable of relinquishing our ego, we all, even Jews, hate that Jewish quality, that willingness to unite, which currently doesn't exist in the people of Israel, obviously. But still, that kernel of anti-Semitism exists. And this is why there's anti-Semitism today, even though the Jews today are not at that level of unity they were in once they were declared a nation. Still, because of that ancient root of the people, there is hatred of Jews today.
Yeah, so it's like I'm an egoist by nature. Every single one of my desires is self-serving. Just want to enjoy myself at all those levels we saw before: food, sex, family, money, honor, control, knowledge. And there's this tiny point which we cannot perceive the goals of that point. We cannot perceive the pleasures we get from that point in any kind of corporeal form, which starts developing and starts bothering us, and we don't like it. Ultimately, we don't like it. Even a person who feels a desire for spirituality, you could say in a positive way, it's not like we feel it as something that emerges and we're attracted to go to some new great thing. We feel it rather as this dissatisfaction with all of our corporeal desires, and that's what brings us to a spiritual search. But ultimately, we don't like this. By nature, our nature, human nature, doesn't like the point of bestowal, of giving, of connecting to other people, of that very tenet, which we might all agree that it's a very nice sounding thing, love your neighbor as yourself. But if you try to implement it in practice, you see that on one hand it's the basis of all the world religions, and you see how you see examples of how it's been interpreted, misinterpreted all throughout history, and what it causes. Because we really, that point of loving others, bestowing to others, it's like even when we're doing work to reach it, it's like some kind of, you have the two different magnets. It's like you come closer to it, and just our egoistic nature just doesn't want it. It hates it. It hates it, and that's because it's opposite to receiving pleasure for oneself, which is our whole nature. And so that's really the root of really anti-Semitism, because we hate that point, which is called the point of Israel, the Jewish point within us. And whether it's, as Chaim mentioned, whether it's even Jewish people. You see this phenomenon of Jewish self-hatred as well, of Jews becoming anti-Semites or anti-Semites in general. The root is at a much deeper place, which we just cannot perceive with our corporeal means. Kabbalists have access to being able to perceive that. I actually want to show a quote here about it, if we go to the presentation. So another one by Baal HaSulam in the Writings of the Last Generation. He writes there that it is a fact that Israel is hated by all the nations, whether for religious, racial, capitalist, communist, or for cosmopolitan reasons, etc. It is so because the hatred precedes all reasons, but each merely resolves its loathing according to its own psychology. So we see that in the world today. We did a page once, you can even look it up. You can come back to me now, Yehudi. So we once did a page, you can even look it up. It's at
Why do people hate Jews?
Yeah, Kabbalah.info/bb/why do people hate Jews, with dashes between each one of those words. We'll put it in the description after this session. And you'll see there a whole development of all kinds of those reasons that Baal HaSulam mentioned: religious, racial, capitalist. It doesn't matter. All kinds of all kinds of reasons that our psychology comes up with for the hatred of Jews, from killing Jesus, deicide, that thing, to blaming Jews for all kinds of things that happened, where later it was revealed that they didn't do those things, such as the assassination of Tsar Alexander II, or the fall of Germany in the First World War. All kinds of accusations such as these, to all kinds of things which even seem very abstract, like Jews having horns on their heads, representing them as Satan, that there's still even people in the world who believe that they actually think that Jews have horns on their heads. And
they don't?
So it's a major thing. It's because there's this hatred for this point of bestowal within each and every person, and it becomes expressed in this corporeal, you could say, external way towards this specific kind of people who are known as these corporeal Jews who we mentioned. On one hand, you could say there's certain, you could say, I don't know if you could call it a pro, but there's corporeal Jews get that ancestry of that point in the heart going through to them, which gives all kinds of abilities on one hand, because you do see, one of the things they're blamed for is, for example, disproportionate success. If you see the amount of, again, for such a small population relative to other populations in the world, 15 million people, 15 million Jews in the world, you have so much, you could say, corporeal, material success coming from this people, which it's also been explained by Kabbalists that comes as a result of once having access to that spiritual light, once having attained that spiritual unity, once having that point in the heart and realizing that point in the heart in a spiritual sense, and falling from that. But still, there's what's called in the wisdom of Kabbalah reshimot, which are like certain records that exist within us. You could say within our DNA, but it's more like spiritual DNA. It's a major topic in the wisdom of Kabbalah. We'll just say it as much as that for now. And these are acting within really everybody in the world, but this spiritual point in the heart that broke and now is kind of buried in the corporeal desires acts within the Jewish people still. And on one hand, it gives abilities, you could say, very, all kinds of abilities to do all kinds of amazing things that we see with our eyes in the corporeal world, all kinds of success in science, technology, innovation, creativity. And on the other hand, they're also the first to be pointed out for all kinds of problems, just like just like Baal HaSulam mentioned, that if anyone's feeling any kind of problem in the world, whether it's on personal, social, global scales, even ecological, even during the time of coronavirus, it didn't take long for all kinds of Jewish conspiracy theories to come out. There's this hatred that gets channeled towards Jews, and that's the spiritual reason for it that we're talking about.
I think you have two books here that actually, both of them detail the types of accusations that Jews are accused of since antiquity, since before Egypt until today. It's not a question of reason, it's just a fact that Jews are hated. We just have to figure out why and what to do about it. By the way, toward the end of this program, we're going to show you a clip where Dr. Laitman speaks about the Arab-Israeli conflict, and he says that it will not be solved until the Jews do what they must do, which is to unite and be a conduit for the rest of the world, and that it will only get worse. And today, nearly 20 years later, it was February 2004, we are beginning to see what this worse might mean.
Yeah, it's actually a very interesting clip. It's the first time we're airing this clip because it was from a lecture series in 2004. 2004, that's also quite amazing.
Yeah.
Rav Laitman, Kabbalist Dr. Michael Laitman, he was speaking about this message all the way back in 2004. He did a lecture tour of the US. This clip, even Chaim did a whole bunch of digging to pull out this clip from our archives, so we're going to present that to you today.
Is there a way we can take questions?
Yeah, it's just here. These are the questions coming in.
Oh, all right.
So, so what I'm mentioning is that he gave that lecture tour. That one specifically, this clip was from Berkeley University, and he's often referenced this lecture tour as one way he was warning back in 2004 in America. He foresaw rising anti-Semitism as being a major problem in the United States back then, when really no one was thinking about it so much back then. And he even said that people were laughing at him and just disagreeing with him. And we actually have a graph here that we prepared. If you can just show the graph. So that was back in 2004. This is a graph from 2008. But as you can see, even just in the reported amount of incidents, it's escalated a lot. Since then. So that maybe you want to say a few words about how, just as Kabbalist Dr. Michael Laitman, he was going around and warning about rising anti-Semitism as a means of talking about its cause and solution according to the wisdom of Kabbalah, and as a means of talking about the role of the Jewish people as we're talking about it here, as a way to alleviate this thing, not just alleviate anti-Semitism, but if Jews realize this concept of unity as we talk about it, and that light comes into the world, then it's almost like similar to how people just naturally hate Jews. Many people hate Jews just at the base level of the desires, and it becomes interpreted in everyone's thought in different ways, and then it's aimed at the Jewish people as this kind of natural force that's urging a certain unity of a critical mass to take place in humanity in order for that light, kind of like a blockage in a tap that is all this pressure is going on this blockage for it to unblock itself. And in order to unblock itself, that unity that we talk about needs to happen. And when that happens, when that unity happens, and it's also just like how people have this natural desire to hate the Jews for not doing the role, it would invert to its complete opposite, to a desire that supports, reveres, respects a certain people who bring in all this pleasure that people really lack in the world today. Because the more we develop in our egoistic desires, the more we feel suffering on all scales, personal, social, global. There's also a lot also why anti-Semitism rises. But when that comes in and we get this access to this unifying spirit, this unifying light coming into the world, we'll see how just because people start enjoying in this new desire that's emerging, so also the people allowing that unity to happen would also become respect, and you see this inversion of an attitude towards the Jews. It's not just a solution to anti-Semitism as if it goes away. It would actually invert to, respecting, loving, revering these people. We actually have interesting quotes. Chaim did a great research with this first book that came out by Rav Laitman in 2013, like a bundle of reads of lots of well-known anti-Semites, and you can even identify in these well-known anti-Semites words even this point of respect for the Jewish people, that as if the Jews do something, then they'll be respected, even from these very notorious, you could say, anti-Semites. You want to say something about that?
Let me think first.
Maybe just while Chaim's thinking, I'll also just put up one of them here. Here, if we can show this quote. This is by Henry Ford. He actually wrote a whole book, The International Jew, the World's Foremost Problem. This is why we say he's a well-known anti-Semite, because he didn't hide it. He a person who's very successful with his business and he's on top of things with money, with control, with a lot of these people who are really at the top of corporeal desires, you could say. They come up with this hatred toward Jews, but they also, since they're very, you could say, perceptive, then you have these you say quotes coming through them. So the whole prophetic purpose with reference to Israel seems to have been the moral enlightenment of the world through its agency. And another one, Vasily Shulgin, Jews in the 20th century have become very smart, effective, and vigorous at exploiting other people's ideas. However, this is not an occupation for teachers and prophets, not the role of guides of the blind, not the roles of carriers of the lame. Sorry, that wasn't the one by him. This was the one. You see that someone who's actually writing about hating Jews comes to points such as this one, which is very interesting. Let them, the Jews, rise to the height to which they apparently climbed in antiquity, when they first became the people of Israel under Abraham. And immediately all nations will rush to their feet. They will rush not by virtue of compulsion, but by free will, joyful in spirit, grateful and loving, including the Russians. This was written in between the 1910s. Right?
Vasily Shulgin was a member of the Duma, the Russian parliament, shortly before the Russian Revolution of 1917. He was an avowed and a very outspoken anti-Semite. And this excerpt is taken from a book that he wrote that he was very proud of, called What We Don't Like About Them. So in this book, he suddenly becomes very poetic when he starts talking about the role of the Jews. Go back to the previous quote.
Hang on, just let me finish this one because it's quite amazing. I'll just finish this one and we'll go back to the previous one. He even continues here. We ourselves, like we, those...
We Russians.
Yeah, we Russians.
Who are known for a Jew hatred.
Exactly, yeah. We'll request, give us Jewish rule, wise, benevolent, leading us to the good. And every day we will offer the prayers for them, for the Jews. Bless our guides and our teachers who lead us to the recognition of your goodness. This one? Yeah,
in this one, which is also by him, he first begins by complaining about the Jews, and then he says, however, this is not an occupation for teachers and prophets. In other words, this is what he thinks Jews should be doing. Not the role of guides of the blind. In other words, they don't see and Jews see. Non-Jews don't see it and Jews see. And this is an anti-Semite who says that. Not the role of carriers of the lame. So it's the role of the Jews to lead the lame and the blind to the light. He doesn't define what the light is. That's the role of the Jews, to find out and to lead toward it. What's important for me to point out is one thing in specific. Going back to the history of the people of Israel and how it was formed, we said that it was formed by people from many, many nations who subscribed to the idea of unity above egoism. And they formed the original Hebrew nation. And they are the ones who later built the dynasty of King David and all those spiritual attainments that they achieved. Of course, King David's Psalms and all the books that they wrote, and King Solomon and all that. And they had these wonderful spiritual achievements. And at some point, they succumbed to their own egoism. Because the egoism keeps growing in all of us. We're all developing. We're human beings. We're not animals that, you go back 10 generations, it's pretty much the same animal as it is today. People 10 generations ago were very different internally than we are. And it's because our egos develop all the time. So at some point, the Jewish people fell from their spiritual unity. And they fell into the egoism. And they, because of it, dispersed and were exiled. And today, what's left is the physical Jewish people. However, today, you can see a revival of the wisdom of Kabbalah. And basically the message of the wisdom of Kabbalah is that unity is more important than selfishness, than our basic inherent nature. Why? Because our basic inherent nature leads us nowhere, as we can see if we take a look around. And the only solution to the exploding egoism, narcissism that we see everywhere around us today is to rise above it and elevate the importance of unity once more above all else, above the ego. And people who subscribe to this idea today, they are the spiritual people of Israel. So it doesn't matter if you were born Christian or Muslim or Buddhist or you name it, or atheist or whatever, or a Jew. If you believe that unity, above all the differences, above all the egoism, all the conflicts, is more important and is the solution to everything, and is the only way that we, humanity, can survive, then you have something called a point in the heart. That's the point of the Creator. The point of that quality of love and bestowal. And that point makes you a spiritual Israel. The Jews today are unaware of the essence of their mission. But those who have points in the heart resonate with that idea. They feel it. They feel that it's correct. They are the ones who today can unite above all the differences. This is why at KabU and at the Bnei Baruch Center, we have people from all religions, Muslims in Turkey and in Arab countries, and Christians and Jews, and people from China, Japan, Russia, Ukraine. And even though there are sometimes active conflicts between the nations from which those people come, here at Bnei Baruch, we have none of that. None, absolutely, because people here understand that unity is what counts. So any conflict, any dissension, any difference, any kind of hatred that is revealed is only a reason to increase the importance of unity even more, and thereby strengthen the bonds between us even more. Eventually, these people who understand, just like Abraham's students, these people who understand what being Israel spiritually really means, they will form the conduit that will bring the light to the world.
I just want to, if we can go to the quote, we'll just read something about that, then we'll go into a few questions. The prime defense against calamity is love and unity. When there are love, unity, and friendship between each other in Israel, again, between all those who have this spiritual desire and who work on it to attain that state of unity, Israel, Yashar Kel, to be straight to God, straight to that force of love and bestowal, so no calamity can come over them. If there is bonding among them and no separation of hearts, they have peace and quiet, and all the curses and suffering are removed by that unity. It's really just a quote there in this book that Kabbalist Yehudi Baal HaSulam and the Kabbalists after him, Rabash, Dr. Laitman, this book Maor V'Shemesh, that they very much respect and often quote in their texts. And now we have actually some very good questions, which I think it's good for us to get to because it'll help explain this further. Debbie Brady is asking, interesting take on why Jews are hated. How does this tie into studying Kabbalah, as most of us are not Jews, nor do we hate them?
Didn't we just talk about it now?
We kind of just talked about it, yeah. So in a way we answered your question. So
great question. Look it up again.
you can look into. I'm going to blend these next two questions together. G. Issa's asking, I'm Jewish. I have a desire to unite, but how do we unite if some of us have reservations on current events? And also Kabbalah Dem Volk is asking, you say that the Jews must unite. What does that mean?
Exactly. Well, we all have reservations. First, there's this saying that two Jews have three opinions, right? There's this famous joke about a Jew who was left on a deserted island on a shipwreck, and he managed to get to an island. So 20 years later, he's saved, and his saviors ask him, how did you survive? So he shows them around, on his island. This is how I ate. This is where I got my food. I built this shelter, that shelter, and I built myself 2 synagogues, like every good Jew. So they asked him, why 2 synagogues if there's only one you here? So he said, this is where I pray. And in this place, I will never set foot on. Because every Jew has this conflict within. And the reservations that we all feel, for whatever reason, in whatever topic, is exactly what we have to rise above. Because what is a reservation? What is a disagreement in the end? It's a different perspective. Right? We all know how the Indians have this circle of fire, right? Where they all sit around a fire and they all look at the fire and describe it. The same fire from different angles, so they describe completely different things. It's the exact same thing. We all have different views, different takes on things. But think about it. If only one view prevailed and the other didn't exist, how would you define that view? How would you justify it? Would you need to justify it? Would you need to even think about it? And if you didn't think about it, would it exist? Every coin has 2 sides. If you take off one side, what's left of the coin? So, we need reservations.
David Mancini is asking, can anyone become a spiritual Jew, or will it always be limited to a small few?
Anyone. Anyone has a point in the heart. The question is it latent? Is it active? Is it, dormant? Whatever stage it's in. Once it awakens, because we're all people, we're all human beings, we're all meant, in the end, to rise above our egos. The only question is when. That's all.
Bruder's got an interesting question. Bruder Jorg. How is anyone supposed to overcome general unconscious hatred of Jews?
I don't know if you can. Well, awareness. Awareness of where it comes from and why. And that's it. The idea in the wisdom of Kabbalah is not to try to overcome hatred, to resist it, to suppress it, to do anything with it. The idea is to increase the importance of unity. You don't go down to fight their dirty enemy. You go up to find what unites you with other people. And the power that you get as a result cleans up all the hatred. Think about it. If you need to build a house, okay? If this house needs to withstand very soft winds, it's just nice and breezy, great weather, always balmy and nice, then you need to build basically a shelter, a hut will do. But if you live in an earthquake-prone area or a place that's prone to hurricanes and storms and whatnot, you have to build a very strong house, right, to withstand all those things. So the bigger our ego, the stronger it is, the tougher it is, the more antagonistic it is toward others, the stronger the unity between you and others has to be. And if this prevails, everything else works out.
Martin Dungy is asking, if we get back to embracing our spiritual unity and shine this on the rest of the world, will they eventually love us?
You realize that's a selfish question. I don't know. We'll wait and see. There's no doubt that the role of those who understand the importance of unity is to unite and to spread it to the rest of the world. How the rest of the world reacts, when they react, if they react, how intense should that unity be in order for it to reflect on the rest of the world, we don't know that. We just have to do our job.
The last couple of questions here I'm choosing because we're kind of getting into the last 5 minutes. So one is by Aurelio Munoz. He's asking, can we share this with our practicing Jewish friends? Basically, yes, go ahead and share it. It's fine. As we said, not just fine, but Baal HaSulam and Kabbalist Dr. Laitman have put in a lot of efforts to trying to communicate specifically this message to the Jewish people, to try to awaken that point of acknowledging and learning what the reason for anti-Semitism is and what the solution to it is and the role of the Jewish people. And so any kind of sharing with, as you said, practicing Jews, go ahead.
Yeah, but instead of, talking about it with your friends, with your Jewish friends, because you'd need to get into a lot of explanations, and when you start talking to people and you present a difficult view that other person who is inherently selfish tends to resist, I would just give them either the link to Why Do People Hate Jews or one of the books that we mentioned here that
actually gets to the next question. Karen's asking what are the names of the books, so I thought
maybe you could go through. All right, so we'll present the books, and I will either give them a book or give them the link to Why Do People Hate Jews and recommend that they read it, and they'll get the point from there. So do we want to go?
Yeah, let's go give a bit of an overview of the books.
So a quick overview. This book, The Jewish Choice, Unity or Anti-Semitism. Can we show them this middle here?
Yeah. Well, it's actually a bit YouTubeized. You can put it on.
Okay.
That sign there that's in the blur, that's
Right.
just a bit
Notice,
of a YouTube trick, but that's a Nazi symbol. Yeah.
yeah, notice this. This is a Nazi medal, all right? There was a Nazi who was in charge of the Jewish office in the SS, and he started investigating into the Jewish people, and he fell in love with the Zionistic idea. He sensed that the unity of the Jewish people in Israel would solve the world's problems. Okay, he wasn't a Kabbalist, he had no point in the heart or anything like that, but he had a sense for Jewish unity. In the end, he was disillusioned because the Jews would not unite, and he became more anti-Semitic than most Nazis. But before that, he was very Jews, but pro-Zionism, because he believed in the idea that Jews should unite around the land of Israel. So he went to the land of Israel, to Palestine at the time, and when he came back to celebrate it, the German Nazi government, they published this medal, where on one side you have a Star of David, right, the Jewish symbol. On the other side you have an inscription that says, around the sign of David, the Star of David, it says, a Nazi goes to Palestine, and on the other side, it says, and writes about it in Angriff. Angriff was a very famous, very popular Nazi newspaper at the time, published by Himmler, who was the minister of propaganda in Nazi Germany, and they promoted those stories about the Zionist organization enterprise that was happening in Palestine at the time. So this book, The Jewish Choice, describes in very historical terms. It's not a Kabbalistic book, it's a history book. But it goes back from antiquity, from basically more or less Egypt until after World War II. And it shows how every time the Jews become more disunited, they are afflicted by whoever is the ruler of the time, whether it's Nebuchadnezzar in the time of the first temple, before that was Pharaoh, and afterwards it was Titus in the second temple, and then etc., 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 etc. And you can always see that before every calamity that hits the Jews, there's a period of intense hatred and conflicts within the Jewish people, including before the Holocaust. So that shows you the connection that there is there. This is from the historical perspective. The one before that, like a bundle of reeds, this was published before. It basically goes to the same time period as the Jewish Choice, but it presents it from a more Kabbalistic perspective. So it doesn't only show the history, but also what Jewish sages have been saying all along. When Jews are united, they succeed. When they are disunited, they suffer. So it uses a lot of excerpts to get the point across. New anti-Semitism basically takes it from where the Jewish Choice left it and talks about the situation today, just showing how the situation continues, the cycle continues of Jewish division and the intensifying of anti-Semitism. And last but not least, the enemy within, Jewish self-hatred, the enemy within. This talks about the tendency of Jews to hate Jews. There's something very peculiar about Jews. Many people criticize their own governments, their own nation. But no person who is not Jewish believes that his own nation does not deserve to have a state, a sovereign state. you have 40-something, I think, Muslim countries. Right? Many Muslims criticize their own countries. Many don't, but many do. But no Muslim will tell you that Muslims don't deserve to have a country, a Muslim country. With Jews, you have many Jews who believe that the state of Israel has no right to exist. And it's not a matter of policy, it's a matter of having a Jewish state. That's just a reflection. But there has been self-hatred among Jews ever since there have been Jews. Why? Because again, it goes against the obligation to rise above one's ego and unite. And no one inherently agrees with this. So these are the books.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Chaim. Thank you very much, Chaim, yeah. They're really an amazing read. I've read all of them. I don't know what else really to say. And I do recommend that because it is such a tough topic, I do recommend taking the books and going through them, because it really takes a lot to, even if you might have gotten some kind of dripping of some kind of understanding now, there's nothing like really going through the material with these books. And also to help you out, if we can go to the slide, just some closing words before we go into this clip from 2004 we talked about. So just to go to the slide. At kabbalahbooks.info, which is Laitman Kabbalah Publishers, there's a discount now to get all these 4 books as one package. I think it's a 47% off discount of getting all 4 of them. So you can check it out there. The link should be in the chat and in the description, so you can follow that easily. So that's all 4 books by Kabbalist Dr. Michael Laitman specifically on this topic. Also at KABU, anyone who's a member of KABU or wishes to join KABU, we also have a course there on this topic called The World, the Jews and the Science of Human Survival, given there by Leo, produced by Leo and Tony Kozinek, which also gets into this in a very highly well-produced video format with all the course-related materials and everything. So you can definitely check that out at KABU as well. And links to join that course are also in the chat and description. And also everyone who's a member of KABU is invited to now, right after this clip we're about to play from 2004 that we told you about Kabbalist Dr. Michael Laitman already giving advance warning of what's really happening in the world today and what's been happening, but which keeps intensifying. So you're invited to a Q&A session, a live Q&A, where we'll be taking more and more of your questions. We noticed we couldn't get to all of your questions now, so we can get to these and more in a more intimate setting on Zoom. So anyone who wishes, you also have the links to join KABU there in the chat and in the description. So we very much look forward to seeing you there. So thank you very much, Chaim.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining. It's a very tough topic, so I'm sure there's still many questions about it. And that's it. Now we're going to go to this clip that we dug out for you, so you can enjoy this. This is Kabbalist Dr. Michael Laitman speaking in 2004 at Berkeley University, specifically on this topic, and giving a warning that is very relevant for today. See you all later.
Can Kabbalah help solve the problems with the Palestinians? The first question.
What's
the attitude of the Arab world to Kabbalah? And when the peace will prevail in the land of Israel? These are very good questions, actually.
Мы должны видеть во всем, что происходит с нашим народом,
we should see in whatever happens to our people,
следствие воздействия на нас высшей силы, Творца.
The consequence, the result of the influence, the Creator's influence.
Это высшая сила, Творец, Он единственный,
This upper force, the Creator, is the only force.
И все, что происходит с нами, это происходит от Него непосредственно.
And whatever happens to us comes directly from Him.
Нет никакой другой силы или другой воли, которая бы действовала
And
в
there is
мире.
no other force and no other will that
которая бы действовала на нас.
that would affect us.
Поэтому, если с нами что-то происходит, мы должны задуматься, почему нам это делается.
So if something happens to us, we should stop and think why.
И опять-таки Каббала указывает именно на то, что мы не занимаемся постижением высшего мира и не знаем, как правильно поступать. Творец вынуждает нас к этому страданиями.
And Kabbalah says that the fact that we do not study Kabbalah and do not try to understand the true structure of the universe compels the Creator to make us suffer and push us forward.
И эти страдания, они идут внутренние, изнутри нас,
And we feel these sufferings inside,
частные и общие,
individual and general,
и через все остальные народы,
through all other people
которым мы обязаны передать это учение.
who expect us to pass
Еще
this knowledge to
во
them.
времена пророков они писали об этом,
Even at the time of the prophets, they wrote about it.
и об этом и сегодня мы видим, что это так и происходит.
And today we see that's what exactly
Наш
happens.
конфликт с человечеством не может быть разрешен никаким другим образом.
Our conflict with the rest of the people of the world cannot be solved in any other way.
А арабы — это всего лишь посланники Творца, чтобы давить на нас.
And Arabs are just the Creator's messengers, and they are sent here to press us, to compel us to do certain things,
Чтобы мы выполнили свое предназначение.
so that we would fulfill our mission.
И это не прекратится, и наоборот, это будет все больше и
And it will
хуже,
not stop until we change,
пока
and
мы
it will continue and even get worse,
все это не претворим в жизнь.
until we implement all this.
И тогда будет мир во всем мире, и
And then
и у нас тоже.
and then peace will prevail all over the world, including Israel.